Bort? Oh, come on, Bort?
Mommy, buy me a license plate!
No, come along, Bort.
Are you talking to me?
No, my son is also named Bort.
The Bort Experience. Hello, and welcome to The Bort Experience, a Simpsons podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be reviewing episode 2 of the Simpsons television show called Bart the Genius. If you're new to the channel, each week I am reacting and reviewing and going over and deep diving into every episode of The Simpsons. They air on Mondays at 9 a.m. Thank you so much for joining me. The first episode is almost up to 50 views on YouTube, which for the channel, it is very appreciated. It's my longest form content. Usually I do short form, under 5 minutes, a lot of shorts and parody reviews. This series, though, will be diving into The Simpsons, and I appreciate everyone who joined me on YouTube. Also, check out the Bort Experience, a Simpsons podcast on Spotify. I think I had around 5 plays there, so not as much, but I'm hoping to grow each one. Last time, I think I was around 61 or 63 subscribers, and as of today of this recording, I'm at 71. So thank you so much for subscribing to all my content, and if you like, please like, subscribe, and down in the description below, we'll have more links to my social media and how you can support the channel. And I want to jump into kind of the overview of the episode, Bart the Genius, which is a pretty good episode. Spoiler alert. Directed by David Silverman, written by John Vitti. The air date was January 14th, 1990. It's kind of an interesting thing that I found. It marks the first use of Bart's catchphrase, "Eat my shorts." And the funny thing is, I mentioned it in the first episode, the book that kind of inspired this entire podcast goes over how the Simpsons writers didn't want to have catchphrases. And it's just funny that there's so many one-liners, especially from Bart and even Homer, where, they are catchphrases. When you hear them, you automatically think The Simpsons. So even though they didn't want to create a catchphrase, they did that anyway. It's just kind of like one of those ironic things when you try to... It's almost like destiny, right? Where it's like, I'm trying to make sure that this doesn't happen, and then it just happens anyway. So I think that was a really cool kind of anecdote. And kind of, a overview of the episode. Bart is moved to a school for gifted children after he switches aptitude test with Martin Prince. That's kind of like the basics of the really high level of the episode. Before we kind of dive deeper into that, I wanted to go over one thing. Since this was the second episode that aired, this is the first time we actually get a couch gag and the kind of the intro sequence. The first episode, Simpsons roasting on open fire, kind of comes in more just like the Simpsons, and then kind of like snow and like more of a holiday type theme. So this is really cool. We get the first sequence, how most people, when they see it, they're like, oh yeah, that's the Simpsons opening couch kind of gag. So we have the first we see the blackboard. The first joke that we see is, "I will not waste chalk. I will not and then W and then at cutoff. We get kind of Homer working at the power plant. There's one of the workers eating a sandwich. I know, if memory serves, I think eventually that will become Mr. Burns, kind of shaking his watch. We get Bart skateboarding from school. We get Lisa on her bike, and Marge kind of driving around with Maggie in her station wagon. And you can kind of tell, like I said, it's been years since I've watched the show, but I know for sure that sometimes this will be shortened or lengthened, and I know they updated it, of course, probably in the newer seasons in terms of the visuals and what we see on screen. But I think that's a good tool whenever, like, hey, we have enough for a 17-minute episode, so let's increase the intro, by however, long it is, or decrease it depending on if we need more time. I think that's a good way to use the time that you're allotted, where it's like, oh, we don't have enough, we can add to the entry sequence, or we can cut out and add more to the episode. And then the actual couch gag itself is Bart pops up out of frame and doesn't come back. So it's kind of like they all kind of squeeze on the couch and then Bart goes out of frame. One kind of keynote that I did notice was usually Homer yells when Marge kind of gets back with the station wagon and he's like, ah, and then he kind of goes inside the house. The scream is not there in this episode. We'll see if it's in episode 3, but at least in episode 2 it is not there. Maybe that's something that they definitely add later. I'm just not sure exactly when. So kind of to kind of dive a little bit more into the actual episode itself, I thought it was like a very good showcase of Bart and his personality and what he kind of stands for or what he's all about. He spray paints, a crude depiction of Principal Skinner, saying "I am a wiener" and spelled incorrectly. But Martin Prince, who is the student that he later steals from his test, he points out like, hey, that's not the right spelling, but technically in some native variants it is. And I know a lot of the writers are kind of like nerd type characters, and a lot of them poured that into Lisa, but I feel like Martin is another kind of vehicle for them to nerd out or kind of have these obscure facts. And I don't know that for a fact, but that's just from a fan and just someone reacting and watching the episode. That's what I took from just Martin's personality, at least at this point in the story. I know Martin might kind of evolve, throughout the show. But I love this kind of dynamic. And then, of course, Bart gets caught. He's the only one that has red spray paint on his hands. This causes, Principal Skinner to call in Homer and Marge to the principal's office. And it's really funny because he, a typical, filing cabinet, has the different names like A through C, and so forth. But there's a specific file, an entire shelf or entire compartment just for Bart Simpson. I think that's really funny. So it's like, hey, this kid's definitely has problems, not only with the school but authority and just getting in trouble, and is kind of a delinquent. And we kind of already get that right off the bat. And I think you got some of that in the first episode, but you really feel that in episode 2, Bart the Genius. And then, we kind of go over that, but right when he's about to get in trouble, I believe that's when, and I might have skipped forward a little bit, but Bart actually switches the test, of Martin, with Martin, and Martin's like, of course, a genius. There's a psychiatrist. His name is, I believe, Dr. J. Lauren Pryor. Yes, I believe that is correct. In my notes here. Yeah. So, and he's like studying Bart with one of those like head cranial measuring devices and saying, hey, are you bored with school? Do you find things not interesting? And Bart's like, yeah, you're speaking my language, man. And it's just funny because most kids, at least, I don't know, haven't been in school in a long time, but a lot of kids, I don't think like studying for tests and the whole school experience. Like, yeah, you like hanging out with your friends and playing games, and maybe you do like reading, but you don't like, hey, you're going to read this chapter of this book that we're telling you. And the school experience is not usually a fun one for most people, in my opinion. And asking these questions, I think to most kids would be like, yeah, get me the hell out of here. So that kind of fast forwards to, him getting accepted to this really smart school. Marge and Homer are super like impressed and like just happy that, that how smart he is. Lisa, of course, is not buying it and, knows it's a complete sham. But, it's kind of funny. There's like a moment where Marge is like, pretty much like, I'm sorry I never noticed this in you before, but I think deep down she really knows what's going on too. But it's just kind of like a funny dynamic. And then we kind of get Bart at the new school, which he doesn't really fit in because, of course, he's not a genius. And, the teacher's very smart. The other kids are speaking like other languages or speaking in different codes. And he gets fooled at lunch and they, pretty much take his whole lunch. And then he's like kind of depressed. He tries to hang out later in the episode with his original friends and they're making fun of him. So he's just not happy. But his dad's really proud of him playing, pitch with him, and they go to the opera and they have a good time making fun of it. It's a really great scene. But eventually Bart is like mixing some chemicals in chemistry, turns himself green. We have Homer kind of talking to him, and then eventually, Bart confesses to the doctor and then to his dad, and it kind of ends with Homer getting very mad and chasing a naked Bart through the house. Overall, like I said, a really great episode in terms of just showcasing what Bart is and what the show can do. And there was a lot of good, I feel like, writing. The animation's still kind of rough, you can tell, in this first season, but I feel like, you really got a more development of the characters. Let's see. I want to kind of go to our segment of Citizens of Springfield. So the characters that kind of appear in the show in this episode. So this time I made sure to have the voice actors who did do each character. So I apologize for not having that in the first episode. So we have Dan Castellaneta as Homer Simpson. He's also credited as the conductor, which I don't really remember a conductor in this episode, but maybe I missed it. We have Julie Kavnar as Marge Simpson. We have Nancy Cartwright as Bart Simpson, which it was and Skinner's secretary. It's kind of crazy. Like in the book, a lot of people, because back then, internet was a really early thing in the 90s. They didn't realize that Bart was voiced by a woman, and in the book, it especially talks about how the Fox executives, they didn't necessarily like outright and say don't say anything, but they didn't really use the voice actors to promote the show, and they didn't want people to know that Bart was voiced by a girl because they thought that would maybe hurt audiences from enjoying the show, and kids and maybe even adults. So I just find that that's like an interesting thing where now, I don't know how many people know this, but like, Naruto, which is a popular anime, that's voiced by a woman as well. And the reason they kind of gave in the books, or maybe something else I read somewhere else, was female voice actors, their voices don't really change as much as like a 10-year-old boy, and that's why you have a problem in a lot of live action shows where they have to like almost write off characters. Like the most famous I could think of is like Lost. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Lost, but one of the actors is a kid and he has to get off the show because he's growing, and he's like, and they're supposed to only be on this island for a certain amount of time. So I think that's very interesting that was like a worry though that people had about voice acting, which is kind of crazy. We have Yardley Smith as Lisa Simpson and Cecilia Shapiro. We have Harry Shearer as Principal Seymour Skinner, Dr. J. Lauren Pryor, and Mr. Prince. We have Marcy Wallace as Edna Krabappel and Miss Mellon, credited as Marsha Wallace. Joanne Harris as Richard and Lewis, and Pamela Hayting as Milhouse Van Houten, and Ethan Foley and just credited as Boy. And then we have Russ Taylor as Martin Prince, Sydney Swift, and Ian. I like how it kind of continues those things where a lot of the younger male characters like Milhouse and Martin are voiced by female characters. In terms of Lisa and Marge and Maggie, they're kind of in this episode. Marge is proud of Bart. She's the one who suggests that they go to the opera. The opera is a great scene too, where they're listening to this opera, and Bart's making fart noises, so is Homer, and they're like, when can we leave? And they're like, yeah, when the fat lady sings. And I think Homer's like, is that it's either Homer or Bart is like, is that one fat enough for you? So it's just like, nothing against that, but I'm just like, it's just so funny that like he's supposed to be this genius, but they can't even enjoy a supposed opera, which I guess really smart people would enjoy. I like how also Homer mentions that there's no like opera dogs. It's like he's at like a baseball park. Like, hey, where's the hot dog at and the beer? So those are the main characters and some of the side characters that appear in the episode. I kind of want to move on to best joke. And this is when Homer is cleaning off Bart. Bart's all green. He's trying to clean it off from the chemistry mishap where Bart mixes an acid and a base and kind of explodes the entire classroom. And Homer says to Bart, I bet Einstein turned himself all sorts of colors before he invented the light bulb. And, you know, it's just such a Homer line to like say something with such confidence that is completely wrong and the audience knows it, or I hope most people know that Einstein didn't invent the light bulb. But it's just so hilarious, and I know there's so many more jokes to come, and especially in this golden age period between most people say between seasons 1 and 10. But it was such a great line. I had to mark that one as my best joke. And then my MVP of the episode has to be Bart Simpson. He, in this episode, he not only, you see his character, you get to understand like what he's about. And I think in these early seasons, or at least this early season, a lot of people connect with Bart, and like he's different than they had characters like this in the past, like Dennis the Menace, and stuff of that nature. But I think Bart really encapitalizes like that kind of rebellious, what kids want to be rebellious and cool and impress their friends. And I think the show does a really good job of that. Some of the funny things in the book where like there's some Simpsons shirts that eventually get made saying like I'm an underachiever, and a lot of parents and schools ban kids from wearing it because they're like, hey, we don't want underachievers at our school. And Matt Groening kind of quipped that there was a comma in that statement, and he was saying no, other people are saying Bart's an underachiever and he's just accepting it, that label. A lot of the other writers didn't agree with his reasoning, but I thought it was kind of like a funny anecdote of like, hey, he had Bart had a really big effect on the culture, especially in the 90s. I always liked, like I said in the previous episode, Homer was always my favorite, but Bart was, in there in the mix as well. He has a lot of funny banter. But yeah, I think he definitely deserves the MVP of the episode. And I like how we have an episode focused on a specific character, and I know more will come in the future. But I think starting out, with the family, sticking with the family and their dynamic and how Bart's behavior affects like the entire family. And, one really funny thing after Bart reveals that, he's not a genius and he lied on the test and like switched them and cheated pretty much. When Bart is running naked through the house, Marge is like knitting or crocheting something, and she's like, what's the matter? What's going on? And Lisa is just like, Bart's dumb again. And she's just like, like I said earlier in the episode, like I think she already kind of knew, but it's just like, oh, that's just Bart being Bart, So I thought it was great. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I didn't rate the first one, but I don't know if I'll do like a rating system per se, but maybe we'll change that in future episodes. But so far, the first 2 episodes have been great. Like I said, I know the animation gets a lot better, and then kind of some of the voice acting, kind of like the tones, and they're like a little bit less angry. I know in future seasons, and maybe even starting in season 2. Like I said, it's just been so long since I've watched the show, but I am excited. To keep doing the podcast and enjoying it. A few things before we end. I wanted to shout out my wife got me this amazing shirt. This is like my favorite joke from The Simpsons, I think. It's from an episode called Homer Loves Flanders. And, it's the popular gif of him going back into the hedge, and then you had the reverse gif of him coming out. I use it all the time. I love it. So thank you so much. I made a joke, and I even mentioned this on social media, where there's like around 800 episodes of The Simpsons. So are you going to buy me a new shirt every week for me to be able to use? So we both laughed at that. So I'm expecting it. So she better do it, or else. Also, I was going through some of my collection of stuff, and I wanted to point out I found some old VHS. If you're listening to this, you might want to switch to the video on YouTube or on Spotify. But it has a collection of different episodes. Very cool. I like the artwork on it. It has like Bart in jail, Maggie with the monkey's paw from a Treehouse of Horror episode, and then Lisa riding a pony. And it's crazy. I forgot. I remember, like, as soon as I saw them, my wife found them when we were cleaning out some stuff this weekend, and it's just crazy. Like, VHS. Be kind and rewind. I don't even have a way to play these, but I thought it's very cool to keep and just have as a something to go for the set. And then also, I found a really cool game. It's very hard, like a lot of old games, but for the Sega Genesis, I found this as well. It's The Simpsons, Bart versus the Space Mutants. And here, I'll just kind of read the back cover, but as you can see, the cover art's pretty cool. And then, let me open it up. It still has the instruction manual and then the game itself. But I'll read the back cover, which I don't even know what it says, but here. Hello, fellow humans. Bartholomew J. Simpson here with important news. Space mutants are invading Springfield. That's right, man. A bunch of totally gross monsters are taking over the bodies of the people who live here. And they want to build a weapon that's going to take over the entire planet. Pretty cool, huh? Anyway, only I can see them because of my x-ray glasses. So I have to stop them. I've got to spray paint things, get radical on my skateboard, use my slingshot, and generally be a nuisance, man. So if you care about this, sorry planet, you'll do the right thing. Save the earth. Buy this game. Thanks, man. And then there's a few other TV Zanius family. Your handy slingshot keeps mutants at bay. Stop the aliens from taking over the mall. Homer can't get enough of the glow-in-the-dark donuts. Simpsons games are really hard, but they're a lot of them are a lot of fun. One that was like one of my favorites was probably the arcade game, and then the Simpsons hit and run game. And I think I'll do like probably a bonus episode eventually, really going more in depth with the video games of the Simpsons. Unfortunately, Simpsons Tapped Out recently shut down. I got into that game when it first came out, so I guess that was the only kind of connection I had. I played it for a good year or so, but then around that time period I was in the military, so I kind of fell off. But I saw that it shut down recently, and I think the world needs a new Simpsons game. It'd be cool if they did another hit and run, or something. I don't know. Simpsons games are really fun. I've had ones on the Game Boy. I had that Sega game that I used to play all the time, and then the arcade game is fantastic. And I love playing that one with friends and just seeing the different powers. It's pretty much just like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade game, but just with the Simpsons skin. But it's a ton of fun, and that's why those kind of beat 'em up type games were so popular back in that kind of like that 90s period and arcade period, when the arcades were in malls. And I'm dating myself, I'm an old man, but they were a lot of fun. Need to bring them back. But overall, really enjoyed the episode. Thank you for joining me on the Bort Experience, a Simpsons podcast. Please, it helps me so much if you can like, subscribe, and comment. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. Also, in the description, I'll have my social media. I'm usually on Threads or Blue Sky. You can message me there or mention me, and I'll try to respond. I really appreciate everyone that's supported me. It means so much. And my goal is to have 100 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm at, like I said, as of this recording, at 71, so I only have 30 to go, and we have about half the year left. So I think I can do it, and I'm confident, and I'm having a lot of fun. So I think that's the biggest thing. So until next time, I hope you have a great day, and peace out. If you enjoyed this review, please subscribe to the Noob News Network on Patreon, YouTube, and social media. Thank you, and have a great day.